Fort St. Angelo is a large bastion fort in Birgu, Malta, located at the center of the Grand Harbour. The fort was originally a castle, and its date of construction is not known. It definitely existed by the 13th century, and in the Middle Ages it was known as the Castrum Maris. It was rebuilt by the Order of St. John as Fort St. Angelo in the 16th and 17th centuries, and it played an important role in the Great Siege of Malta of 1565. The fort was then used by the British as a stone frigate, and was known as HMS Egmont or later HMS St. Angelo. It was last used for military purposes in 1979, and in 1998 part of it was handed back to the SMOM. The fort is currently being restored. Fort St. Angelo has been on Malta's tentative list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites since 1998, as part of the Knights fortifications around the harbours of Malta. History. Middle Ages. The date of its original construction is unknown. However, there are claims of prehistoric or classical buildings near the site, due to some large ashlar blocks and an Egyptian pink granite column at the top part of the fort. There is also the mentioning in Roman texts of a temple dedicated to Juno, Astarte, probably in the vicinity of the fort. There is also the popular attribute to its foundation to the Arabs, 870 AD, but nothing is concrete, although Al-Himyari mentions that the Arabs dismantled Hisn. But there is no actual reference if this fortress was in Birgu. Its probable start as a fortification is the late medieval period. In fact, in 1220 Hohenstaufen Emperor Frederick II started to appoint his own Castellani for Malta, who needed a place to live and secure the interests of the crown. The remains of a tower that may date back to the 12th century can be traced among the more recent works. The first mention of Castrum Maris is to be found in documents from the 1240s when Paulinus of Malta was the lord of the island, and later when Giliberto Abate made a census of the islands. Another reference to the castle is that from the short Angevin rule, where documents list it again as Castrum Maris and list a garrison of 150 men, together with several weapons. It seems also that by 1274, the castle already had two chapels which are still there today. From the same year exists also a detailed inventory of weapons and supplies in the castle. From 1283 the Maltese islands were under Aragonese rule, and the fortification was mainly used by Castellani, who were there to safeguard the interests of the Aragonese crown. In fact, the Castellans did not have any jurisdiction outside the ditch of the fort. Knights period. When the Order of St. John arrived in Malta in 1530, they chose to settle in Birgu, and Fort St. Angelo became the seat of the Grand Master, which included the refurbishing of the Castellans' house and St. Anne's Chapel. The Knights made this the primary fortification and substantially reinforced and remodeled it, including the cutting of the dry ditch to make it a moat and the Domides bastion built by 1536. By 1547, a large cavalier designed by Antonio Ferramolino was built behind the Domides bastion, and a Girial battery was built at the tip of the fort by sea level to protect the entrance to Dockyard Creek. These works transformed the fort into a gunpowder fortification. Fort St. Angelo withstood the Turks during the Great Siege of Malta, during which it succeeded in tearing apart a sea attack by the Turks on Sengli on 15 August 1565. In the aftermath of that siege, the Knights built the fortified city of Valletta on Mount Sybaris on the other side of the Grand Harbour, and the administrative centre for Knights moved there. In 1644, Giovanni de' Medici proposed a new fort be constructed on Orsi Point, and the name and garrison of Fort St. Angelo be transferred to the new fort. He drew up plans for the proposed fort, but they were never implemented. It was not until the 1690s that the fort again underwent major repairs. Today's layout of the fort is attributed to these works, which were designed by Carlos de Grunenberg. who also paid for the construction of 4 gun batteries on the side of the fort facing the entrance to Grand Harbor. As a result, one can still see his coat of arms above the main gate of the fort. By the arrival of the French in 1798, therefore, the fort became a very powerful fortification including some 80 guns, 48 of which pointed towards the entrance of the port. During the short 2-year period of French occupation, the fort served as headquarters of the French army. British period. With the coming of the British to Malta, the fort retained its importance as a military installation, first in use by the army. In fact, in 1800, 2 battalions of the 35th Regiment were resident in the fort. However, at the start of the 20th century, the fort was taken over by the Navy and it was listed as a ship, originally in 1912 as HMS Egmont, when it became a base for the Royal Navy in the Mediterranean, but in 1933 renamed as HMS St. Angelo. The British did not make any major modifications to the fort, although they converted No. 2 battery into a casemated battery for 3 9-inch RML guns in the 1860s, and built a cinema and a water distillation plant in the early 20th century. During World War II, the fort again stood for siege with an armament of 3 Bofors guns. In total, the fort suffered 69 direct hits between 1940 and 1943. When the Royal Navy left Malta in 1979, the fort was handed to the Maltese government, and since then parts of the fort have fallen into a state of disrepair, mostly after a project to transform it into a hotel during the 1980s. Recent history. On 5 December 1998, a treaty was signed between Malta and the Sovereign Military Order of Malta granting the upper part of Fort St. Angelo, including the Grand Master's House and the Chapel of St. Anne, to the order with limited extraterritoriality. Its stated purpose is to give the order the opportunity to be better enabled to carry out its humanitarian activities as Knights Hospitallers from St. Angelo, as well as to better define the legal status of St. Angelo subject to the sovereignty of Malta over it. This treaty was ratified on 1 November 2001. The agreement has a duration of 99 years, but the document allows the Maltese government to terminate it at any time after 50 years. In terms of the agreement, the flag of Malta is to be flown together with the flag of the order in a prominent position over St. Angelo. No asylum may be granted by the order, and generally the Maltese courts have full jurisdiction and Maltese law shall apply. A number of immunities and privileges are mentioned in the second bilateral treaty. Other parts of the fort are leased to the Cotonera Waterfront Group, a private consortium. On 5 March 2012, it was confirmed that the European Regional Development Fund allocated €13.4 million for the restoration, conservation and reuse of the site, which will see the fort opened as a major visitor attraction highlighting its history and role through the ages, as well as to cater for educational programs, cultural events and live historical experiences. The restoration is being managed by Heritage Malta. The fort is currently undergoing restoration, and it is not open to the public. It is to host the Commonwealth Heads of Government Meeting 2015, which is to be held between 27 and 29 November 2015. Layout. Upon the arrival of the order in 1530, the Castrum Maris consisted of a shell keep containing various buildings, including the Castellan's house and the Chapel of St. Mary, and an outer ward. The castle also included a chapel dedicated to St. Angelo, which was later rededicated to the Nativity of Our Lady. By the time of the Great Siege of Malta of 1565, the fort still retained most of its medieval features, but a number of modifications had been made by the order, including Domede's Bastion, built during the reign of Juan de Home de Suicoscan. It was heavily altered since the 16th century, especially when it was converted into a gunpowder magazine. Part of the bastion had been destroyed in World War II, but the damage was repaired in the 1990s. Ferramolino's Cavalier, a high cavalier near Domide's Bastion, built between 1542 and 1547. Its roof had 8 embrasures, and several magazines and a beacon were also located on the Cavalier. De Guiral Battery, a small sea-level battery on the western side of the fort. It was named after Francesco de Guiral, its commander during the Great Siege. The battery was altered in the 17th and 18th centuries, and again by the British. Most of the present configuration of the fort dates back to reconstruction in the 1690s. Among the features added Grunenberg, there were 4 batteries facing the entrance to the Grand Harbour. No. 1, No. 2 and No. 4 batteries were heavily altered by the British, while No. 3 battery retains more of its original features. Burials. The following Grand Masters were all originally buried in the chapel of Fort St. Angelo: Philippe Villiers de l'Isle Adam, Piero de Pont, Juan de Home de Suicoscan, Claude de la Sengel. However, their remains were relocated to the crypt of St. John's Co-Cathedral in the late 16th century. Ghost story. The fort was supposedly haunted by the Grey Lady, a mistress of the Castin de Nava family. The story goes that she protested at not having the same status as de Nava's wife, and fearing that the affair would become public, he ordered his guards to get rid of her. The guards killed her and sealed her body in the fort's dungeon. Upon hearing that the guards had killed her and not sent her away, de Nava ordered them to be killed as well. The ghost of the Grey Lady was first seen in the early 1900s, and she was vulgar and aggressive. An exorcism then took place, and the Grey Lady was not seen again for a number of years. Her ghost appeared again during World War II, when she supposedly saved some soldiers' lives from aerial bombardment. According to popular belief, a sealed passage was opened and the skeletons of the Grey Lady and the 2 guards were found within. This discovery is not recorded in any official records. According to some fishermen, the fort is also haunted by Ottoman soldiers that were executed during the Great Siege of 1565. Gallery. Fort St. Angelo as seen from Valletta. West face of the fort, from Dockyard Creek. Main gate. Inscription over the gate. West face of the seaward bastion. Chapel of the Nativity of Our Lady. The fort from Sengley.